Welcome to the EntrepreNoob podcast, a podcast about the ups and downs, risks and rewards of business. Each week, you will hear about the unexpected victories and epic failures experienced by your co-hosts and invited guests throughout their journey of entrepreneurship. Grab your notepad and thinking cap as they explore ideas and expose challenges faced by aspiring and seasoned entrepreneurs. And now, introducing Adam Bussey and Steven Johnson, your co-hosts and humble test subjects.
Hey, this is Steven.
This is Welcome back to the EntrepreNoob podcast. This entrepreneurship is definitely a wild ride. So what do you got today?
A lot of fun. Got a couple questions we can talk about today. Start off with one very good question. What makes a person decide to be an entrepreneur? Do they decide, or is it the people they're around, their family? Maybe family's got a business they grow up around. What do you think it is?
Most of the time I actually do think it's family that happens. It has an effect on them in a big way, for real, because they it's a strong influence for that. But I always say entrepreneurship is grown in the heart of a person and slowly beaten out of them with all of life's failures, until they so scared that they landed something else. But
yeah, I mean, what would be a family, something in your family that you think kind of developed you as an entrepreneur?
Being broke. It was the hustle to get out of being broke, for sure. Beat your way out, Growing up, I wouldn't say I was raised poor. It was just being, seeing money around and, things. The more times your mom told you no, we can't have that, no, we can't have that. And you start to get an awareness of something's a little bit different. We're missing something.
Yeah.
So you start chasing a dollar.
All right.
You hate to get that bad habit going, though, because after years of business crap, you learn that chasing a dollar ain't the way to do it. But when you're broke, what else are you going to do,
Well, I think for me, family had a lot to do with it as well. Living here right in the backyard of Quality Clothing, spend a lot of time with my grandpa coming in every day. Spent a lot of time with him at the warehouse, and he always had a lot of money. And it was because he was an entrepreneur. He had a lot of financial freedom. I got a lot of things that was kind of the opposite of you. It wasn't the lack of money. It was now later in life seeing the opportunity that comes along with being an entrepreneur and having more resources and things like that. You go to work for somebody else and you start working by the hour and you start thinking, there's got to be something I can do to provide more for my family and have more control over what's going on. And I remember my grandpa would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
It's a real entrepreneur.
But he would be in bed before the sun ever went down, so he could get back up and start working again the next day. But my dad has always tried to invent stuff, and he's always had these ideas.
Hey, Steven, we need to get a patent on this.
But I always kind of joke with him because he would come up to me with some idea, and I would say, I got a real good idea for you. Come up with this round object that you can place on a vehicle, and it actually will help the vehicle travel down the road. And I would joke with him about always trying to reinvent the wheel, because he would come up to me and he'd say, man, I got this invention. You think anybody's come up with this before? And I'd type it on the internet, and it'd be showing up on Amazon that somebody's...
The toothbrush.
Yeah. But I guess your family impact does have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, so when you did your family encourage entrepreneurship or do you think they just let you go? Do you think you got that encouragement growing up, or do you think you just learned it?
I think I got
by
the
default?
opposite. Now,
Weird,
not
isn't
from
it?
my grandpa. Definitely didn't get the opposite from him. He actually told me, pissed my parents off. I won't say parents, it pissed my mother off. But he said, school's not for everybody.
Wow.
And whenever I would go to school, he took me a lot of times. You know, he'd come pick me up. We'd go eat breakfast. He'd take me to school. Most of the time, he took me to school. He took me to school even in high school because I didn't get my license till I turned 18.
Wow.
So my grandpa's taking me to school. Not when I was a senior. My buddies was picking me up and taking me then. But he took me to school all the way up till I was 16, 17 years old. And we'd go eat breakfast. And he always kind of had that business entrepreneur impact on me. But my mother was very much about, you need to go to school. You need to get an education. You need to get a good job. And
Was that her background?
I think
Or how she
a
was
lot of
raised,
the
you
reason
think?
why she was like that is because when she was younger, she didn't have any security. Her dad, she never knew who her dad was. Her mother died whenever she was a small kid. Then her grandma started taking care of her, and then her grandma passed away and she had to move in with other relatives, and she just didn't have a very stable family. And so I think the idea of that security and getting the check, getting the education, just she wanted to hold on to whatever she could because she didn't really have a whole lot
You know,
when she was younger.
That's one of the major things that I think that actually persuades people to go the career or of an employed avenue is because of consequences of some insecurities that have happened. So they're what's the word, drawn to the secure path to try to prevent some of that pain that they grew up in. You can't blame anyone for trying to avoid that pain, but a lot of that pain is just induced because someone was mistreating different things, and trying to get that, hash all that out takes a little bit of time. It's interesting that your mom was probably leaning more towards, career, and your grandfather kind of was like sliding that entrepreneurship in there whenever he could.
I definitely have experienced both because I did. School was kind of a big influence on me. When I was in high school, my freshman year, my mom signed me up for all the hardest classes. She wanted me to be educated. I went to college and I got a bachelor's degree. I've worked at Food Line and I've been an employee. I've done basically what she wanted me to do, and I have a lot of great lessons and experience that I've got from it, but just something about, I guess, the way my grandpa did things, how my dad, just that rush of creating things for yourself, I just enjoy it way more. I feel like I work harder whenever I'm doing that. I guess it just feels better whenever you're creating something for yourself than for creating something for someone else.
Yeah, I think that's the main value point for me pushing entrepreneurship on people. It's not because I'm trying to ruin their lives. I just want them to experience the vibrance, I guess, or the enjoyment out of what life has to hold on the line when it's, it's all on your shoulders, fail or succeed.
What was your first experience as an entrepreneur?
My very first, I can go way back, man, to like 7 years old, buying a box of snack cakes. I was from a big family. It was 10 of us. And at the time, there was probably, it was probably 8 of us in the family. I told you we kind of grew up poor, so at the time I saved up, I think it was like $1, and I went down to the store and I bought a box of zebra cakes, brought them home and sold them to everybody in my family for 50 cents. They didn't have $1, so you take a box of 8 cakes, sell them all for 50 cents and turn $1 into 4. It's like, that's the first, that was too easy. But did you know that at 7 and 8 years old, you get all the same exact criticism as you get at 20, 30, 40 starting a business?
What was the criticism you got?
Well, you're screwing your family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Overcharging. You only paid $1 for it. How you going to charge me 50 cents for one of them when you paid $1 for 8? They're like, you're welcome to go buy yours if you wanted to.
That's kind of like whenever I used to go to work.
I was selling convenience.
Right.
They're already here.
I used to go to work with my dad. He'd tell my mom he was taking me to school, and then I'd hop in the truck and ride with him to Winston-Salem or Wilkes-Barre or something like that. And we wouldn't come home for 3 or 4 days. She wouldn't find out that afternoon, wait a minute, where's Todd and Steven at? Well, we're off at the warehouse sale. So we'd get there early, whatever the first morning it was we were opening up. He'd be putting the sale together, and I'd be preparing what I was going to be selling for the day. 7 or 8 years old, and I got started, I'd be drawing pictures of Pokémon or Dragon Ball Z characters, something like that, and I'd put them up on the wall with tacks, and I'd have, my favorite characters would be more expensive, and then the less popular characters, they would cost less. And
is that because you drew them crappier, or because they were?
I'm sure I probably did do a better job on the more expensive ones, right? But whenever the sale would be going on, you'd have a lot of, it was ladies' clothes, so it was mostly women coming through. But I guess with me being a little kid, they
pulling on the heartstrings.
Yep. So,
hey, that's marketing.
One time over 3 days, I made $800 from pictures.
If I was still a little kid or a puppy, I could make a lot of sales.
Yeah. Well, I remember my dad being like, whenever I first started putting them up there, I'd put $20 on one, $25 on another. He was like, "Son, that's kind of high, ain't it?" And I'd be like, "Hey, that's the most popular ones right there. That's what I got to do." And looking back, I'm very surprised that anybody would pay $25 for something like that. But then again, I guess when it's a little kid, you feel like you're helping a little kid. And I wonder what those ladies would have thought if they knew, like, how much money I made from doing that for the week. Because, I mean, you're talking, $800-900 over the course of 3 days. There's a lot of people that don't make $800 or $900 over 3 days now, working good jobs. So that was my first experience ever selling anything or creating anything.
What a hustle! It's a wonder you ever went back to school. Like, Dad, I'm out. I'm quitting.
So with your first experience with your zebra cakes, is there anything that you feel like you were doing well or something you were doing right at that time that maybe if you think back you're like, man, I should be implementing that strategy today?
It probably took me 30 years to get back to it, but kind of like what a brand is. A brand is simple and clean. It doesn't have the clutter of, that's why Starbucks doesn't sell cheeseburgers. You know what I mean? They're like, clean up the model. The model was so clean. You buy for $1 and sell for $4, and all of the business adventures I've had since then, every time you start, the list of products starts too long. Usually, with most people, it was with me with a lot, the product list, like all of the things I could do, was on the list, and it took time to say, hey, building a full scale system for every one of these items is a lot of work. I'm going to scale it back a little bit. So that first model was so clean and simple that I think if you could take any business owner right now who's in over his head and running his business and he's overstressed or overworked, I could walk in and take my zebra cake business philosophy and apply it to it and be like, hey, cut all this crap out. Let's clean this up and let's just do this. But a lot of times it's fearful. It goes back to the security thing. If I cut all that out, when I lose the profit from those other items, you lose the profit, but you lose a lot of other headache that comes along with it. So streamlining yourself is definitely the answer.
I think just for me, it would be just putting myself out there, creating something I thought was valuable, putting it out there, putting a price on it that I thought was the right price instead of...
You were definitely ripping people off.
It's capitalism.
The lemonade stands were $1. When I did a lemonade stand, I charged $1.
The price somebody will pay.
It's value.
Actually, if you set your price at $25 and somebody pays $25, that means it was worth more than $25, right?
Technically,
I mean, do you think they thought this is worth exactly $25? They have it for $25. That's a deal. Or usually, whenever a person's making a decision on whether they're going to buy something or not, the chances of it being exactly right is probably not very good. Chances are, if the value is higher than what you see as the price, if you buy something, if you're willing to pay $25 for something, you were probably willing to pay $26. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the value of the item exceeds the value of the dollar, so they exchanged it for it. Probably get into some details there that are a little bit different from one business to the next, but sometimes it's an equal exchange.
But for me, when I put those characters up there for $20 or $25, you said I was ripping people off. I feel like now I would have more of a feeling about doing something now like that, possibly charging somebody what is more than what a person would think was reasonable than I would then. When I was 7, 8 years old, I didn't care. Hey, here it is, $25. There you go.
Clean. And
didn't have any feelings about it. Probably when I was 7 or 8 years old, I didn't give one crap about.
You said you grew up with money. If I'd got $25 when I was that age, I'd have probably tried to retire.
Well, you know what happened to that $800, right?
Huh?
I don't either. Because all of a sudden one day,
you were a true business owner.
I came home that weekend and I had a wallet. I had a Velcro wallet that I kept just cash in. But I never really used the wallet. If I just had money, I just stuck it in my pocket. Half the time I'd change clothes. A couple weeks later, I'd put on a pair of shorts that I, laid in the floor or whatever, put them on. Maybe they even were washed that way and pull out $10, $15 out of my pocket. So my net worth was X, but it was spread across all the clothes I had in the house. But I did keep that money in a wallet because I knew I had actually made quite a bit of money. And I went back like a couple weeks later and there was nothing. I found the wallet, but there was no money in it.
Your dad was eyeballing it.
Somebody either got
he worked that whole day and he's like, son of a gun, he made more than I did. That's the way it goes, though. Business is a funny thing.
So would you say there was anything about the zebra cakes that, other than just buy for $1, sell for $4, that you may have done that was kind of creative, your own unique way as Adam Bussey to sell the product?
You know what was funny is when it happened, I didn't know what was happening. My dad at the time, my dad dabbled a little bit more into entrepreneurship as I got older, but more by default and not by choice. I felt like, you probably have to ask him on that, but my dad tended to seem like he worked for people, so which was his choice to do, or it was how he was raised, or whatever. But he always admired entrepreneurship. So because my dad looked up to people and admired entrepreneurship, I definitely picked up that gene. So when I did the zebra cake thing, I think it was a complete accident. So the whole business model fell in my lap because, number one, I was broke. I'd scraped up the money to buy the zebra cakes because I wanted to eat the zebra cakes. And then when I got home, I don't even remember, but somebody probably suggested it to me. You know what I mean? Some adult probably said it. Probably wasn't even an idea of my own. Someone planted the seed and I ran with it. So it was probably more of a discovery and a gift from an adult that handed it to me, but I don't remember.
Can you think of any other examples like the zebra cakes before you actually started your first business, maybe as you were growing up, that was in your mind just another proof that I'm meant to be an entrepreneur? You know, you look back and you think of maybe 3 or 4 things similar to the zebra cakes before you actually started your first business.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. So what I did was I learned a trade working with my dad. He worked for a guy which was almost like an entrepreneur. He was a subcontractor. He had his own equipment. So I worked for my dad, who worked for this other guy. And basically it just intrigued me. So the more I did it, the more I was like, I'm going to own my own equipment. So I basically approached it first just like what my dad did. Only I still was coming from a place of starving to death, you know what I mean? Where I was making this small percentage and he was making most of the money because it was all of his equipment. So I convinced some lady at the bank to give me a loan and bought me some equipment, and got the same guy that my dad was working for to sign a paper saying I could go into business. But I don't have, that was the moment. The second entrepreneurship big. Was
how old were you when you did that?
18. So that was the second time I had been introduced to it, but it was basically from a feeling of having a boot on my neck, and I don't know why I felt that way. I couldn't explain that other than feeling the struggle from my parents my whole life. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have the money for that, we don't have the money for that, we don't have the money for that, and me just not understanding it, you know. Right. I just didn't take that as an answer. I was like, I think money's out there and you're missing it, you know. So
when I was 20, 21 or something like that, I would go on the weekends. I'd get up at 6 o'clock and I'd go to all the yard sales, and I would look for video games. I'd look for retro video games like Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, stuff like that, that maybe a lot of times you might have a grandma or a grandpa who those items were still at their house from whenever their grandkids were young, and they didn't know what the value was.
Right.
And, you know, at the time, you could sell just a console for $35. You could sell a controller for $15, $20. The games were running $20 a piece. And I remember the first time I ever did this, I went and it was a elderly lady. She had a whole bunch of stuff in a big old sack. It was like a shoulder sack, and I opened it up, and there was a Nintendo 64 console, 2 controllers, and 10 games in there. And she saw me looking at it, and she came around and she said, "I'll give you all of it for $3." And I remember thinking, yeah, here, take this $3. So as soon as I got it, I was like, instantly, I'm going to start doing this every weekend. So I went home and I looked up the value of everything, and it ended up like if you bought each item separately on eBay, it was like $350 or $375 worth of stuff. So I kept it because I only had 1 console and 10 games, and I had noticed looking on eBay that you can actually get more value if you sell stuff as like packs. So the next weekend I went and ended up picking up like 3 more systems, and it ended up I had 4 systems, 8 controllers, and I think I had like 24 games or something. So I basically sold however many packs of consoles. I think I sold four packs. I had four consoles. Each one had 2 controllers, and each one had 6 games. And I had like a B, and a couple C games. Put all of them on eBay, and I started to bid at $10 on each one of them, which that was so hard for me to do. Like, I think actually first I put them on there for something kind of high, and nobody bid, so I said, screw it, I'll put it on there for 10 and just let everybody bid on it. And I ended up making about $700 between all 4 of those packs, and I think I probably invested like
How old were you
50,
then?
60. I was like 20 or 21 years old.
Okay.
But it's just, I always thought about whenever I'd be at work or something, it'd be kind of a tough day at work, I'd be thinking, man, all
Go back
these
to
times
them.
I've just went and done something and made that much money, and now here I am, working.
How many people do you think actually have the entrepreneur's experience in their childhood or in their memory? They're working a job right now, and we're sitting here talking about our entrepreneur moments that happened. It doesn't sound like you had a whole lot of them, and I didn't either, one or two. And all of a sudden, I'm here today. I'm a chronic entrepreneur. I love it. And what do you think most people are doing with that information? You know what I mean? Are they just
I
passing
think
it
some
off?
people
Everybody's
value,
had it, right? Or
I think
no?
some people value potential more than
Security or
potential more than security. Some people would rather take a risk on what they think they can achieve than not pull the trigger on something because it's not a sure thing.
Yeah.
And it's I guess you just have to make that decision on is the risk.
I think you're right on that. I always I like to get real critical, and then I have to step back and not be critical, because each woman has to make their own decision as to what they want to basically fault themselves for 20 years from now. You know what I mean?
But I do think it's not necessarily true that each person in that situation weighs the risk versus the reward. I do think some people get to a point to where they have a block and it's like, no, that's a risk, no.
Yeah.
Even if it's a very low risk. For example, whenever I started my business and I made the decision that I was no longer going to be an employee anymore, I was going to go full time in my business. My mother, she was excited for me, but she also was happy. She was back in that security mode.
Yeah.
And she was like, maybe one day if you get good enough at this, you can do this. And what she offered up was another job, being an employee, doing it for someone else. So in other words, you're going to get so good at being an entrepreneur that you're going to go be an employee. And actually the opposite is normally how the average person would think it works. You get so good at what you're doing that now you're marketable and you can do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that makes more sense. But that security...
Someone that only sees security.
Yeah, and I do think you can get locked in on security. But I do also think that there are people who do weigh the risk versus the reward, and if it's a good enough risk, they will take that risk.
Yeah. It's funny, I've been to the casino. I've sat at a poker table, and I am not a gambler in that way. But probably, when I think about it, it's probably just because I don't know what I'm doing. But in the areas of things that I've learned and studied, it's just like learning a language. If you don't know the language yet, you're a little insecure about going to the country that you're going to if you don't know that language. But once you know the language, that kind of, there's a little bit of peace that comes over you. And it's not that you're not going to get there and be misunderstood. You have a complete different culture, and you may not have the dialect that they have. But as a business owner, you do find, have found that over time, the more you know, the less you see the risk that other people see, just because they haven't been down the road yet. But I always out there waving my hand, hey, this is fun over here.
And I agree with you that competence and having ability, that will make you more likely to take the risk. But how about a person who maybe they don't have quite as much of ability, but their confidence, the amount of confidence and self-esteem they have to where maybe they're not as good, but they think there's, because really,
I'll take that more.
I mean, if you think about it, it really doesn't matter what you can do. It matters what you think you can do.
Belief is everything, yeah.
Because you're the one who's taking the action. So people maybe who are more confident in their abilities, or maybe they don't even have any abilities, they're just a confident person, they're going to be more likely to bet on themselves to take a risk like that. And you have some people who have outstanding ability. They're fantastic. Everything they do, they're good. They're successful, but maybe they have a lower self-esteem, and you're looking at them, you're like, you're great. You're awesome at everything you do. Go for it. And they're like, no, I can't do it. I feel bad for those people, and you know, you try to talk to them and tell them how great they are, but it's almost like they feel like if they admit they're great, then they'll let up.
Yeah.
And they won't maybe work as hard or something of that nature.
Gary Vaynerchuk's always pushing that one thing that just says, do whatever the heck you want. Completely disregard how much you'll make, the security of it. Quit relying on your parents. You know what I mean? Quit that secure job. Basically pursue whatever it is, because in the pursuit of whatever you want to do is all of life's enjoyments. I mean, is the passion, is the adventure. And but boy, isn't that just a easy thing to say. But when you have the way you grew up, your friends around you, and all of that, Gary Vaynerchuk's got his work cut out for him, because people just can't quite see that at a glance. So he hammers at them pretty good, though.
Yeah. So whenever you did
up.
get that loan and you bought your own equipment, is there anything that, looking back now, you say, if I'd have done this, I'd have, maybe a mistake you made or something where you say, I could have actually done something with that, but maybe you don't know you didn't know some things in that you know now, or what's a mistake that you made then that now you've learned from it, it's helped you in the business you have now?
Mistakes back then, I would say, was I believed, and it's probably because of the working class that I grew up in, I just believed that hard work was going to get me my million that I wanted. You know, it was going to take me everywhere I wanted to go. So anything that even was closely related to being a pencil pusher or an office person, or even remotely hinted to the fact that I might be lazy, I ran from it. For years, I ran from paperwork. I ran from, you know, learning how businesses actually function, charts, graphs, budgets, all of that stuff. I just thought that I was going to get my hands so dirty that one day they were going to give me all the money I ever needed. And it was wrong. It taught me a lot. I wouldn't take back the experience. I wouldn't want to relive it, though, either. You know what I mean? I don't know how that plays out, but so I guess not finding, I can only fault myself for this, not finding an older entrepreneur to say, you know, hey, I'm about to do this. What do you think? You know what I mean? And not just say, hey, don't do that, do this. Which is why I kind of have always, I've kind of become that person. When I seen anybody with even the slightest interest, I step in, I say, do this, do this, do this, and that's what'll happen. You know what I mean? Just trying to get them to taste it, basically. And saying, hey, I'm right here. If you have a question, I'll tell you where I screwed up. I ain't going to, you know what I mean? You're not going to win the lottery because you talk to me, but I can tell you what I did.
Right.
And if you're listening, it might steer you from falling off the cliff somewhere.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a passion for that, and it's because of my failure that I never found that person. The people around me, I feel like I kind of got my cousin in business because I called him and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. He's like, that's pretty cool. And then my younger brother kind of grew up, and he was like, hey, I'm over here working a job. Do you think I should start my own business? And what type of business would you start if you were going to start one? And, you know, I backed the truck up, everything that I knew, and gave it to him. And I did that because of my mistake. And
they're all entrepreneurs now, and they're sustaining themselves with their businesses.
Yeah,
doing well,
actually, two of them are outdoing me right now, so screw them. Yeah, but it was cool because I didn't have that was my mistake. Is not finding an older entrepreneur and latching on and saying, "Hey, teach me something." It wasn't for lack of asking, but you know who I used to ask? I used to always talk to old people. I didn't care if they were in business or not. I just would find old people. For some reason, I was always easy for me to talk to them.
You had respect for wisdom or something
yeah,
that you thought.
I thought they were going to teach me
knew.
something. So I'd walk up and be like, "Hey, if you were me, what would you do?" And you get this advice. And but that's kind of, I didn't go seek out the entrepreneur. I didn't know that's what I was supposed to do. I didn't even recognize there was a difference at the time.
Yeah.
So my mistake was not finding somebody who had been through some stuff that could,
well, on
get
that
me down the
same
road faster.
topic of kind of making sure you're talking to the right person, for me, motivation has always been a very, very big deal for me. I've always been the kind of person who, if I'm motivated enough, I go nonstop and I can achieve something. Or if I'm not very motivated, it's the exact opposite. I just don't do anything. So I try to stay motivated. And the first time I ever started listening to people like Zig Ziglar and guys like that, it really does help listening to that motivation. I know a lot of people think it's stupid and they think, why do you need to listen to this self-development stuff? But it really did a lot for me. And I've noticed that you even know in your own head, like, okay, right now I'm very motivated. Right now I'm capable of doing things. If this happens, I know that's going to take my motivation down.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes, you want to talk to people. I'm the kind of person who I like to tell people what's going on. But I have to be careful, because if I go tell somebody what's going on and they're the kind of person who's like, oh, man, don't do that. You don't need to be doing that.
Yeah.
That's going to take my motivation down, and then I'm going to start second guessing myself.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here, and it's weird because it's all in your head. Like, I'm motivated. I want to tell somebody what's going on because I'm excited. But if I go tell this person, they're going to say something to demotivate me, and then I'm not going to be able to do what it is I know I need to do. And it seems odd to me that knowing all that, it would work that way, but it does work that way. So instead, I'll go talk to somebody who I know is going to say something positive.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important, to have people you can talk to who are going to build you up. And that doesn't mean they blow smoke at you and just tell you everything you have is a fantastic idea. But it's almost like they know when is the right time to tell you the truth about something, and it's like they know, okay, he's looking for a confidence boost right now. Yeah. He's looking for motivation, so I'm going to give him that. And that's a great thing right there.
After just years of up and downs, being able to be honest with yourself and know if you're moping around one day and you go talk to that friend that's going to take you down that moping road some more, being able to be honest with yourself is part of entrepreneurship. It's like, what am I doing? Like, I'm going over here so this guy can depress me some more because I'm enjoying it right now. And just being brutally honest to have that day, or like, I'm going to go read some books and build myself up because I know I suck right now, But those two things, that honesty is crazy. Some of the other guys I know,
Don't you think it's odd, though, that you know how that works? It almost seems like something that would only work if you didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But it just seems odd to me that, okay, if I go talk to this person, they're going to say something, then I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. That just seems weird to me, but hey, it works that way.
It's kind of like an out-of-body experience when you're a business owner, because you're your own manager and you set up this other manager to handle, pushing you when you're not feeling so motivated, So.
And it's almost like, that person who's always down on you, if they're up on you today, that's like even a bigger boost.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to know when to talk to the right people based on reading how they feel. And motivation, I feel like that's what drives me.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, I feel like I got off track there. You asked me what my mistake was, and it was definitely not seeking out the entrepreneur. And I had another one that was on my mind. Hopefully I can get back to it, but I feel like I left somebody hanging in my my explanation of that. But
well, I'd say my first business that I ever started was about 5 years ago when I started A&S Designs, and I think I did that kind of how probably a lot of people start their businesses, and it's like, here's something that I'm maybe good at. Maybe I don't love it, but I have a little bit of skill, and I think it's marketable, so I'm going to try to make some money doing it. And for me at that time, it was web design. And I had never built a website before, but I was really good with computers. I had done a lot of drag and drop stuff on Publisher, and it may have even been you who told me about using some online website builders. And I went on there and I started playing around, and I was able to actually build a website that I thought was as good or better than some that I'd seen online. And so
you were in.
I was in. I thought, here we go. And I didn't think about anything other than the fact that my website that I can build looks better than this website, and that person's going to want something better. But I didn't think about the fact that how much better is it to be worth whatever the price is, or is it worth investing in something that's better
Life
than what I have?
Life beats you down. You need to go back to that artwork.
Is it yes, it's better than what I have now, but they're both crap. So if I'm going to invest in something, I'm actually going to invest something that's worth it. And I know now, looking back, the service that I provided compared to the services I do now are horrible. Like, I go back and look at some of the things I did for people, and at the time, they were satisfied. I was satisfied.
That's right.
It was a good deal.
Yep. Business
but now
is that
I look back and I'm like, man, I really did. I didn't do them wrong because I was doing my best at the time.
Yeah.
But now I look back and I'm like, man, that's trash right there, what I did. But I do think that was a very important experience for me, because that was my first real taste of actually going out and trying to, not only have I created something, and this is different than drawing a picture and hanging it up and somebody buys it because you're a cute little kid. This was actually me creating something that was a good service, going out and selling it to a person who had a need. And the first time you do that, that's a good feeling. Like, the first one just lets you know, I can do this.
Yeah. But you as a little kid, though, drawing that picture, you provided a ton of value to some little old lady that came in and gave you $25 for your drawing, because she knew she had absolutely made your day. She's actually the reason you're sitting here right now, because it was your first entrepreneurial experience. How are you going to knock the value of that lady's $25?
You're right.
I mean, it's probably $1 million check. You know what I mean? And it was earned back then.
I need to find out who that was.
That's right.
Probably on the mailing list.
Look her up.
Somewhere.
That's right.
So, as far as the kids, what do you think is the reason why things like that aren't taught in school? Like, why are we not trying to get kids to create? Because if you think about it, the innovation and the things that have been created because of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of things that are life-saving, a lot of things that today we can't live without. The only reason they were created is because of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But I feel like whenever I was in school, I was never guided along the path of actually entrepreneurship. Yes, you had trades and things, but as far as innovating and creating something that nobody's ever thought of before, I don't feel like that was ever anything that they tried to guide you down a path. There was no classes about anything like that. Why do you think that is?
I might get a little controversial here. So I think it happened over time. Initially, school was there to give you reading, writing, and arithmetic, to launch someone into the basics of what you were going to face, when you got out into the real world. So it was fantastic. You know what I mean? Abraham Lincoln didn't get much of an education, but he got some books and he learned a whole lot, and became the president of the United States. So that in and of itself, school is brilliant. Give you the basics and the foundation. Even when we talk about it right here, right now, it's like, why would you think that was bad? I mean, you cannot look down on school. college and all of this stuff, because it is the basics, right? But because it became essentially a business, and all those schools are public and funded federally and privately in all these different ways, essentially it is a group of people whose jobs depend on this revenue. They've turned it into a business, and their specific sales survival is what has turned the entity into this all-knowing, all-valuable, nothing outside of this, the only answer. It's not that it's true. It's that entity, in order to survive, has had to preach that. You can't fault it, because every business in the world is like, my product is the answer to your problem.
Right.
So I don't fault them for it. You just have to learn the truth and find out if you're supposed to be outside of it.
What would it even look like if they did start teaching entrepreneurship in school?
Well, it causes the risk of you needing teachers. Entrepreneurship is a threat to you needing that entity. So they can't. They literally cannot teach it, because it's like teaching your own employees to go start their own businesses. Very few entrepreneurs out there today actually let that information be known, educate their employees, and encourage them to go start their own companies and move to a level where they can go do what I do. You know what I mean? They train you all the way up until the point, and then they just turn off that information and lock those people in.
There is one difference between teaching someone entrepreneurship and teaching someone history or something like that.
Sure.
When it comes to history, you learned history.
Yeah.
You learned enough history that you know it, and now you can teach it. Whereas in entrepreneurship, you learn the theories of entrepreneurship. That doesn't mean you can necessarily just go teach it. Maybe you can, but it's something that you almost have to experience. You have to do it. You have to have some failures, some successes before you can truly understand what you need to teach. It requires a little bit more experience to teach entrepreneurship than it does another subject in school.
And I don't know if it's Robert Kiyosaki, but I know he talks about it in one of his books somewhere. He said, I'm not sure that it was him, but I'm sure he don't mind the credit for it, that A students teach B students how to work for C students. And it's funny that the underdog in the academic world ends up being the leader in the business world. And I don't know exactly what that comes from. If it's a disinterest in the C student in academia, you know what I mean? Is he just not interested? So he's like, I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. Or does he lack an IQ? Does he lack some intelligence? Or does he have a rebellious streak? You know, what is it that actually causes that? But when you go to the schools, you're actually seeing the A students that thought the world of education. It meant everything to them. They got grades, A grades. It meant everything. So then they formed their own careers to do that, what their professors did and their teachers did, because they looked up to them, and it was everything. So it's a bit of a flawed system, but in a group, you know, as a whole, we need all of it. You know, right. How would you ever take away any of it? You know what I mean, you have to have the entrepreneur that totally, you know, just runs out the door and says, this ain't for me. And you have to have the A student that says, I'm going to teach anyone and everyone how to be a mathematician. You know, how would you not have him in the world? Because if you want to learn to be a mathematician, who are you going to learn it from? Right. The guy who's passionate about it, you know. So, yeah, I don't know that there is a world that the entrepreneurs are like, hey, you need to teach entrepreneurship in school. I'm like, yeah, that's a bit of a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. We wouldn't want it to happen. Technically, we wouldn't want it to. It'd be nice. It sounds good, but it would defeat the school's purpose. It would be them selling against themselves, and it's just not I don't want anybody to do that in life. I want everybody to have what they believe is right and live it to the fullest. You do that. That's what you should do. So I'm preaching entrepreneurship, and they can preach academia.
There you go. Well, what do you think? Have we covered most everything?
We burnt through some stuff right here.
Yeah, we've definitely went through our topics and talked about a few extra things, and
yep. I did remember what that one topic was, and that was my laziness towards book work. So it's two things. The one was the other that I mentioned, but the other main thing was that I didn't sit down and do book work and learn that other side along with. Do some brain work, do some physical work, some brain work, some physical work, and balance that. I didn't want to leave this episode out there with someone saying, like, I wish he'd have told me what the other failure was.
Well, now all you do is sit on the computer and type, right?
Pretty much, but I have a really strong willingness that gets into a whole other topic. I don't want to cover that another day, but I will briefly cover it. Management is an extreme willingness that if you don't do it, I can find somebody who will. And so even though I sit at a computer all day as a manager and as a developer,
and that was
an
a joke,
entrepreneur,
by the way. But I'm glad you have more value to share with us.
I thought you were slamming me there.
I'm definitely not slamming you, because that's what I do all day.
So yeah, sitting at the computer. But when I make a phone call to anybody that's on my team that works with me today, there is a unspoken, extreme willingness for me to step right in and do what they're doing. And I don't care if it's the dirtiest, nastiest, deepest ditch job. As the business owner, I'm every bit as willing to do it today as I was the first day. And I keep that and I hold that, not because I flaunt it to them. I never even say it. It's in the back of my mind, and I keep it there as an honesty between me and myself. So when I'm a manager saying, hey, you need to get in there and clean that better, it's because if you don't, I will, or I'll find somebody else who will. And that's the truth. That's the honesty in my management. So I hold that inside. But let's talk about that later.
I guess that's why you usually rake the leaves and take the trash out and put up fences around here whenever you're coming back home from Alabama.
That's right. Show up and get busy. Remind myself that I'm the same person I've always been, and ain't nothing changed. So
well, that's cool. Well, I think we covered enough to
wrap it up
and move on to next week.
All right,
what do you
man.
think?
We'll see you then.
All right.